It, adapted from Stephen King's seminal 1986 horror novel and a remake of the 1990 miniseries, is Andy Muschietti's second directorial venture. It takes place in the fictional town of Derry, Maine, and centers around a group of misfits as they battle bullies, abusive adults, and a killer clown that lives in the sewers.
Does it float?
Well, yeah, it does. And then some. It might be obvious to some, but this review will contain spoilers. So just keep that in mind. To call myself a Stephen King fanatic would be an understatement. I've read most of his books and survived most of his film adaptations, and it was where it all began. When I was 12, my grandparents bought me the 1,000-page monstrosity for Christmas, and I subsequently tore through it like a clown through a toddler. Ugh, too soon. So naturally, I was following every piece of news, behind-the-scenes footage, and cast interviews I could get my hands on. I was hyped. But after the gargantuan failure that was The Dark Tower, I began to worry about certain elements changed from the novel. Namely, its decision to focus entirely on the kids section of the story and have it take place in 1989? Alright, I get that they were doing a bit on the sequel taking place in the present day, but a jump from the 50s to the 80s seemed to me like it would disturb the context of the story. I was wrong. Setting the story in the 1980s was an excellent choice. I saw a review penned by Doug and Rob Walker, the nostalgia critic to the uninitiated, that criticized the bizarre focus on Ben's love of New Kids on the Block. But the scene when Bev sees the poster on the door was hilarious. These little gags aren't unfocused, they deliberate aspects of the character. Which leads on to my main point. The strongest factor of this film isn't the scares or the special effects. It's the characters, which is arguably the weakest point of any horror film. Take notes, you paranormal activitiers. You can tell, just by their acting chops, that this cast of kids are gonna go far. Especially Finn Wolfhard and Sophia Lillis, who play Richie and Bev respectively. If only Finn will stop getting typecast as a kid fighting monsters in the 80s who can't get a break. And of course, we can't speak about the cast without mentioning the Clown Prince of Murder himself, Pennywise. Bill Skarsgård kills this role. He goes from charming to horrifying to wacky and back to horrifying again. He nails all the facets of this character. Even his movements are distinct, jerky and alien-like. Compare this to Tim Curry, who exemplified himself in his own way, but just moved like a regular dude. Reading the book, this is exactly what I envisioned. I have a much larger gripe, however, with this movie, and that's its inability to find a consistent tone. In the first half, the overwhelming dread that builds is palpable. Every character has a very genuine reason to be afraid of this monster. But as we cross over into the second half, the film undergoes a transformation of its own and goes from unsettling to downright insane. The final showdown itself looks like it came straight out of Evil Dead 2, with the Losers Club spouting one-liners and beating the ever-loving shit out of Pennywise. It's a far cry from the battle of psychological wits that takes place in the book. Regardless, I really enjoyed this movie. It was faithful to the books, whilst also incorporating its own spin to certain elements. I am a bit worried about the sequel, however, since the adult section of their tale is unanimously regarded as the weakest. I hope they pull it out of the sewer. This is Lord of the Warthogs, signing off.